It started as just another comedy segment on The Tonight Show until Jimmy Fallon read one sentence that changed everything. The laughter died, the cameras kept rolling, and in that moment, America witnessed something more powerful than entertainment. The quiet heroism of a man who had spent 25 years running toward danger while everyone else ran away. The Tonight Show studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy. The Roots were warming up, their infectious rhythm filling the space between the iconic blue and gold backdrop. Audience members chatted excitedly in their seats, phones out, capturing every moment of their brush with late-night television history. The familiar scent of studio makeup and fresh coffee mingled in the air-conditioned atmosphere. Jimmy Fallon stood behind his desk, adjusting his navy blue tie and running through his opening monologue notes one final time. His signature smile was already in place, that genuine warmth that had made him America's favorite late-night host. The countdown clock showed 3 minutes to air, and everything was perfectly choreographed, exactly as it should be. Tonight's guest lineup was solid but unremarkable. A rom-com actress promoting her latest film, a chef demonstrating a trendy new cooking technique, and Captain Michael Rodriguez, a recently retired firefighter from the Bronx who had become something of a local celebrity after a viral video showed him rescuing a cat from a fourth-floor apartment fire on his very last day of service. Captain Rodriguez sat in the green room, nervously adjusting the collar of his borrowed suit. At 58, he still carried himself with the confident posture of a man who had faced down flames and smoke for over 2 decades, but television was uncharted territory. His weathered hands, marked with small scars from years of service, fidgeted with a worn manila envelope he'd brought from home. "Captain Rodriguez?" A production assistant appeared at his elbow. "You're up after the cooking segment, about 12 minutes. Michael nodded, his throat suddenly dry. When the bookers had called 3 weeks ago, explaining that his retirement rescue had touched millions of viewers and asking if he'd like to share his story on The Tonight Show, he'd almost said no. What could he possibly say that would interest Jimmy Fallon's audience? He was just a guy who'd done his job. But his wife Maria had insisted. 25 years, Michael. 25 years of getting up at 5 a.m., running into burning buildings, saving lives. People need to hear about heroes like you. She'd helped him pick out the suit, driven him to the airport, and kissed him goodbye with tears in her eyes. "Make us proud," she'd whispered. The envelope in his hands contained something he'd never shown anyone except Maria. 25 years worth of thank you cards, letters, and photos from people whose lives he'd touched. Families whose homes he'd saved, children he'd rescued, fellow firefighters he'd mentored. Maria has suggested he bring a few of the most meaningful ones, just in case Jimmy wanted to see them. Ladies and gentlemen, we're back with Captain Michael Rodriguez, recently retired from the New York Fire Department after 25 years of service, Jimmy announced, his voice carrying that perfect blend of respect and enthusiasm that made guests feel instantly at ease. Captain, first of all, thank you for your service. I have to ask about that viral video. Your last day on the job and you're still climbing ladders to save cats? The audience erupted in warm applause. Michael felt some of his nerves settle as he looked out at the sea of friendly faces. Jimmy's genuine interest was palpable, not the polite attention of someone going through the motions, but real curiosity about Michael's story. "Well, Jimmy," Michael began, his voice stronger than he'd expected. "In 25 years, you learned that every call matters. Cat, person, doesn't matter. Someone called for help, and that's what we do." "That's what we do," Jimmy repeated, shaking his head with admiration. "I love that. So tell me, what's it like running toward danger when everyone else is running away? That's gotta take a special kind of person." Michael shifted in his chair, considering the question. It wasn't the first time someone had asked him that, but something about Jimmy's delivery made him want to give an honest answer, not the standard response he usually offered. "You know, Jimmy, I never thought of it as running toward danger. I thought of it as running toward people who needed help. When you see it that way, there's really no choice involved. You just go." The studio fell quieter, the audience leaning in slightly. Even the roots seemed to be listening more intently. Jimmy set down his coffee mug and focused completely on his guest. In 25 years, you must have some incredible stories. Lives saved, families reunited. Do you keep in touch with the people you've helped? Michael's hand moved instinctively to the envelope beside his chair. Actually, Jimmy, that's something I wanted to share with you. Over the years, people have sent me letters, cards, photos. I kept them all. My wife Maria thought, maybe, he hesitated, suddenly feeling foolish. Maybe you'd like to see a few of them? Jimmy's eyes lit up with genuine interest. Are you kidding? I would love to see them. Bring them over here. This wasn't planned. This wasn't in the pre-interview notes or the segment outline. But Jimmy Fallon had built his career on authentic moments. And something about Captain Rodriguez's quiet dignity told him this was going to be special. Michael stood, envelope in hand, and walked around the desk to join Jimmy. The camera operators adjusted their angles instinctively, sensing a shift in the show's energy. This was no longer a standard celebrity interview. This was something different. These are just a few, Michael said, settling into the guest chair Jimmy had pulled up beside his desk. 25 years, you accumulate a lot of these. He opened the envelope carefully, as if handling something sacred. The first item he pulled out was a child's drawing in bright crayon colors, a stick figure in a red hat standing next to a house, with "Thank you, Captain Mike" written in uneven letters across the top. "Oh my gosh," Jimmy breathed, holding the drawing up for the cameras. "This is beautiful. Tell me about this one." 7-year-old Tommy Rodriguez, no relation, Michael smiled. House fire in the Bronx, about 15 years ago. Whole family made it out safe, but Tommy was convinced his goldfish was still inside. I went back in and got the bowl. Fish was fine. The audience murmured appreciatively, but Jimmy was studying the drawing more closely. "Captain Mike," he read. "He made you a superhero." "Kids do that," Michael said quietly. "They see the uniform and they think we're something special. Truth is, we're just regular people who show up when things get bad." Jimmy set the drawing aside carefully and looked at Michael with new understanding. "But that's exactly what makes you special, isn't it? You show up." Michael pulled out the next item, a formal letter on hospital letterhead. "This one's from Dr. Jennifer Walsh at Bronx Presbyterian. There was an apartment fire, elderly woman trapped on the 3rd floor. We got her out, but she'd inhaled a lot of smoke. Dr. Walsh wanted me to know that Mrs. Patterson recovered completely and was back home with her daughter." Jimmy read the letter silently, his expression growing more serious. When he looked up, something had changed in his demeanor. The entertainer was still there, but underneath it was something deeper: recognition, respect. "How many of these do you have?" Jimmy asked softly. "Hundreds," Michael admitted. "Maria organized them all in photo albums at home. Birth announcements from babies born in firehouses when we couldn't get to the hospital in time. Wedding invitations from couples who met in our firehouse after we rescued them from the same burning building. Christmas cards from families whose homes we saved." He pulled out a photograph. A family of 5 standing in front of a rebuilt house, smiling widely. The Kowalski family. Lost everything in a fire in 2018, but everyone survived. They sent me this when they moved into their new place. Mr. Kowalski wrote on the back, "You gave us the most important thing, each other." Jimmy took the photograph, studying the faces of the family. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was real life, real heroism, real human connection. "Michael," Jimmy said, and his voice carried a weight that made everyone in the studio lean forward. "Do you realize what you've done? 25 years of this, hundreds of families, thousands of lives touched." Michael shrugged, still uncomfortable with praise. "Just doing the job, Jimmy." "No," Jimmy said firmly, setting down the photograph. "This is more than a job. This is..." He paused, searching for the right words. "This is what heroism actually looks like. Not in movies or comic books, real heroism. getting up every day and choosing to help people. The captain pulled out one more item, hesitating before handing it to Jimmy. "This one's different," he says quietly. "It's not from someone I rescued." Jimmy took the envelope, noting that it was more recent, postmarked just 2 months ago. His name was written in careful, elderly handwriting. Captain Michael Rodriguez, Engine Company 42, the Bronx. "Go ahead," Michael encouraged. "Read it." Jimmy opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of cream-colored stationery. As he began to read silently, the cameras caught the subtle change in his expression. His eyebrows furrowed slightly, then his eyes widened, and finally his mouth fell open just a little. He looked up at Michael, then back at the letter, then up again. "Captain, is this—" "Just read it, Jimmy, out loud." Jimmy cleared his throat and began to read, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of emotion. "Dear Captain Rodriguez, you don't know me, but I know you. My name is Eleanor Martinez, and I'm 73 years old. I live in the apartment building across the street from Engine Company 42, and for the past 15 years, I've watched you go to work every single day." The studio was completely silent. Even the crew members had stopped their quiet movements to listen. Jimmy continued, "I'm writing to tell you something you probably don't know. Every morning, I sit by my window with my coffee and watch the firehouse. I watch you arrive early, always the first one there. I watch you check the trucks, talk with the younger firefighters, help them with their equipment. I've seen you in that window, and you've never seen me, but you've been my hero for 15 years. Jimmy's voice caught slightly, but he kept reading. "My husband Frank died 5 years ago, and since then, some days are harder than others. But knowing that you're across the street, that people like you exist in this world, that has gotten me through the darkest moments. You probably think you're just doing your job, but what you're really doing is showing all of us what good looks like." The audience was completely still. Several people in the front row were openly crying. Jimmy took a breath and continued, "I heard you were retiring, and I wanted you to know that your service meant something to more people than you realize. You never rescued me from a fire, Captain Rodriguez, but you rescued me from despair just by being the kind of person who shows up every day to help others. Thank you for giving an old woman faith in humanity. Your neighbor and admirer, Eleanor Martinez." Jimmy set the letter down carefully, his hands not quite steady. He looked at Michael, who was sitting quietly, his own eyes moist. "Michael," Jimmy said, and his voice was thick with emotion now, "do you understand what this means? This woman watched you for 15 years. 15 years of just being you, just showing up, just doing good, and it gave her hope." The studio erupted in applause, but it wasn't the usual excited clapping of a late-night audience. It was deeper, more respectful. It was the sound of people recognizing something sacred. Michael wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I never knew," he said quietly. "I never saw her in the window." Jimmy stood up from his chair and did something he'd never done before in 15 years of hosting. He walked around his desk, pulled out the chair next to Michael, and sat down beside him. Not across from him as host and guest, but next to him as one human being to another. "You know what this is?" Jimmy said, gesturing to the letters and photos spread across his desk. "This is proof that heroism isn't about the big moments. It's about the small ones. It's about showing up. It's about caring. It's about being the kind of person who makes other people believe in good." He picked up Eleanor's letter again. "This woman, Mrs. Martinez, she didn't need you to rescue her from a fire. She needed you to rescue her from the feeling that the world doesn't have enough good people in it. And you did that just by being yourself." Michael looked at Jimmy, then at the audience, then at the cameras. "I wish I could tell her thank you," he said. "I wish she knew that her letter means more to me than any medal or commendation I ever received." Jimmy was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then his face lit up with that familiar, mischievous grin that his audience knew meant something special was about to happen. "What if you could?" Jimmy said. "What do you mean?" Jimmy turned to face the main camera directly. "Mrs. Eleanor Martinez, if you're watching tonight, and I really hope you are, Captain Michael Rodriguez is here in our studio, and he has something he wants to say to you." The camera zoomed in on Michael's face as he looked directly into the lens. For a moment, he seemed to struggle with what to say. Then, with the same quiet confidence he'd carried into burning buildings for 25 years, he began to speak. "Mrs. Martinez, this is Captain Rodriguez. I never knew you were watching, but I'm so grateful you were. Your letter reminded me why I became a firefighter in the first place. It wasn't for the glory or the excitement. It was because I wanted to be the kind of person who makes the world a little bit safer, a little bit better for people like you." He paused, his voice growing stronger. "You said I rescued you from despair, but you rescued me too. You reminded me that the work we do matters, even when we don't see it, even when we're just showing up, doing our jobs, being ourselves. Thank you for 15 years of faith in me. Thank you for believing in good." The studio was completely silent except for the soft sound of people crying. Jimmy had tears streaming down his face. The camera operators were wiping their eyes. Even the Roots, who had seen thousands of guests and countless emotional moments, were visibly moved. Jimmy stood up and extended his hand to Michael, but when the captain took it, Jimmy pulled him into a hug. Not a quick television-friendly embrace, but a real hug between two men who understood something profound about human connection. "Captain Michael Rodriguez, everyone," Jimmy said, his arms still around Michael's shoulders. 25 years of service, hundreds of lives saved, and one old woman who reminded us all that heroes aren't people with superpowers, they're people who show up." The audience rose to their feet in the longest standing ovation in Tonight Show history. It went on for over 2 minutes, waves of applause washing over the studio as people stood and clapped and cried and celebrated not just Michael's service, but the reminder that good people exist, that heroes walk among us, that someone is always watching out for someone else. As the applause finally died down and the show went to commercial, Jimmy kept his arm around Michael's shoulders. "That was beautiful," Jimmy said quietly, away from the microphones. "Thank you for sharing that with us." Michael looked at the letters and photos still spread across Jimmy's desk, then back at the host who had given him the space to honor 25 years of service in the most meaningful way possible. "Thank you for listening," Michael said simply. "Thank you for understanding what it meant." When the show returned from commercial, Jimmy made an unprecedented announcement. The Tonight Show would be donating $25,000 to the Bronx Fire Department in Michael's honor, and they were setting up a special mailbox for viewers who wanted to send their own thank you notes to first responders in their communities. But the real magic had already happened. In those 10 minutes, a retired firefighter had shown America what quiet heroism looks like. A widow had learned that her faith in humanity was justified, and millions of viewers had been reminded that goodness exists, that people care, that someone is always watching out for someone else. 3 days later, Eleanor Martinez appeared on The Tonight Show herself, brought to the studio by her daughter who had seen the episode. She met Michael in person for the first time, and their embrace became one of the most shared videos in the show's history. In the weeks that followed, the show received over 100,000 letters from viewers sharing their own stories of everyday heroes. Teachers who stayed late to help struggling students, nurses who held hands with lonely patients, grocery store clerks who remembered elderly customers' names, neighbors who shoveled sidewalks without being asked. Captain Michael Rodriguez returned to the Bronx, to his wife Maria, to his retirement. But he also returned to something else, the certainty that his 25 years of service had mattered. Not just to the people he'd rescued from fires, but to an old woman who watched from her window and believed in good because of what she saw. The envelope of thank you notes sits on his mantle now, next to Eleanor's letter and a photo from The Tonight Show. Sometimes he opens it and reads the cards again, remembering the faces, the families, the moments when being brave meant simply showing up. Because that's what heroes do. They show up. They do their jobs. They care about people they've never met. And sometimes, when the world needs reminding that goodness exists, they sit on a late-night talk show and read letters that prove love is always watching, always hoping, always believing in the better angels of our nature. It wasn't just late-night television. It was a reminder that heroism lives in ordinary moments, and that sometimes the people we save are the ones who save us right back. The impact of that night rippled far beyond the studio walls. Within hours, the video had been shared millions of times across every social media platform. News outlets picked up the story, not as entertainment news, but as something deeper. "The night Jimmy Fallon reminded us what heroes look like," read one headline. "A firefighter's letters show the true meaning of service," read another. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from an unexpected source. 2 weeks after the show aired, Michael received a package at his home in the Bronx. Inside was a thick manila envelope with a return address he didn't recognize. The Martinez family, Bronx, NY. Eleanor Martinez had passed away peacefully in her sleep just 1 week after meeting Michael on the show. Her daughter included a note explaining that Eleanor had spent her final days organizing something special. Inside the envelope were dozens of photographs she had secretly taken from her window over the past 15 years. Pictures of Michael arriving at work, checking equipment, mentoring young firefighters, loading trucks for emergency calls. But it was the last item in the package that brought Michael to his knees in his own living room. A handwritten journal titled "My Daily Hero," documenting 15 years of observations. Page after page of Eleanor's careful handwriting, recording not just what she saw, but what it meant to her. January 15, 2018. Captain Rodriguez stayed 2 hours past his shift today. I watched him teaching the new recruit how to properly coil the hose. The young man seemed frustrated, but the captain was so patient, showing him again and again until he got it right. Frank used to teach me things with that same patience. Some people are born teachers. March 22, 2019. There was a cat stuck in the tree outside the firehouse today. Captain Rodriguez climbed up and got it down, even though it wasn't an emergency call. The little girl who owned the cat hugged his legs so tight I could see it from here. He knelt down and talked to her for 10 minutes, making sure she wasn't scared. Heroes have time for small rescues too. September 11, 2020. It's the anniversary today. I watched Captain Rodriguez stand alone in front of the memorial wall for nearly an hour this morning before his shift started. I saw him touch several names on the wall. I said a prayer for whoever he was remembering. Some wounds never heal, but some people carry them with such dignity. Maria found Michael sitting on their kitchen floor, surrounded by photographs and journal pages, tears streaming down his face. She sat beside him and read Eleanor's words over his shoulder, her own eyes filling as she understood the magnitude of what this woman had witnessed and preserved. "She saw you, Michael," Maria whispered, "really saw you. For 15 years, she saw the man I fell in love with, the man our children are proud to call father, the man who never came home from work without a story about helping someone." The journal revealed something else. Eleanor's own story. Her husband Frank had been a janitor at a local elementary school for 30 years. She wrote about watching him leave for work each day with the same dedication Michael showed, about how Frank's quiet service to his community had been overlooked by everyone except the children he helped and the wife who loved him. February 3, 2016. Watched Captain Rodriguez clear snow from the fire hydrant across the street this morning. No one asked him to do it. No one was watching except me. Frank used to do the same thing at the school, staying late to salt the walkways so the children wouldn't slip. Good men do good things when no one is looking. That's how you know they're really good. Michael called Eleanor's daughter that same evening. Through tears, they talked for over an hour about the woman who had watched and recorded and believed. Eleanor's daughter revealed that her mother had been battling depression since Frank's death, and that watching Michael's daily routine had become her anchor, her proof that the world still contained people worth believing in. "She used to say you were her guardian angel," Eleanor's daughter told Michael, "but I think you both were guardian angels for each other. She needed to see goodness in the world, and you needed to be reminded that being good matters, even when you think no one is watching." When Jimmy Fallon learned about Eleanor's journal, he invited Michael back to the show for a second segment. This time, Michael brought Maria with him, and together they read excerpts from Eleanor's observations. The segment became a special episode titled "Heroes Who Don't Know They're Heroes," featuring stories from viewers about the everyday people who had changed their lives simply by being consistently good. The response was overwhelming. Teachers shared stories about custodians who learned every student's name. Nurses talked about security guards who checked on elderly patients during their lonely nights. Children wrote about crossing guards who made them feel safe every morning. But the most powerful response came from first responders themselves. Fire departments, police stations, and paramedic units across the country began sharing their own collections of thank you notes and letters. A Facebook group called Eleanor's Window was created for people to share photos and stories of the everyday heroes they observed in their own communities. 6 months later, The Tonight Show established the Captain Rodriguez Award for Everyday Heroes, an annual recognition of first responders, teachers, healthcare workers, and community servants who embody the quiet heroism that Eleanor Martinez had so faithfully documented. Michael's retirement became busier than his working years. He spoke at fire academies, not just about fighting fires, but about understanding the broader impact of service. He visited schools, showing children Eleanor's photographs and explaining that heroes aren't just in movies, they're in every community, showing up every day, doing their jobs with dignity and care. The manila envelope of thank you notes grew into several boxes as people from around the world sent letters sharing their own stories of rescue, hope, and gratitude. Each letter reminded Michael of what Eleanor's journal had taught him, that service creates ripples we may never see, but that touch lives in ways we never imagine. On the first anniversary of Eleanor's death, Michael and Maria organized a memorial service in the small park across from Engine Company 42. Hundreds of people attended: firefighters, community members, families Michael had helped over the years, and viewers who had been touched by Eleanor's story. They planted a garden in her memory, with a bench facing the firehouse where she had kept her faithful watch. The plaque on the bench reads, "In memory of Eleanor Martinez, who reminded us that heroes are the people who show up. And in honor of all who serve, knowing that someone is always watching, always hoping, always believing in the good you do." Michael visits the bench every morning before his daily run, sitting for a few minutes in the spot where Eleanor spent 15 years watching and believing. Sometimes he sees her daughter there, or neighborhood children playing nearby, or other community members who have made the bench a stopping point in their daily routines. The letters keep coming, the stories keep growing. And somewhere in the Bronx, across the street from Engine Company 42, a bench sits empty but not forgotten, reminding everyone who passes that the most powerful force in the world isn't fame or fortune or recognition. It's the simple act of showing up, day after day, to make the world a little bit better for someone else. Heroes don't need capes or superpowers or movie contracts. They just need to care. They just need to show up. They just need to be the kind of people who make others believe that goodness exists, that help is available, that someone is always watching out for someone else. It wasn't just late-night television. It wasn't just a retirement celebration. It was proof that ordinary people doing extraordinary things with quiet consistency can change the world, one life, one moment, one act of service at a time.